Dawn breaks over a medieval town square. The church bell tolls, not for prayer, but for punishment. A woman, draped in torn linen and iron chains, is dragged through the mud. Her crime is not theft, not treason, not murder. It is desire. The crowd jeers, children throw stones, and priests chant psalms over her shame. In this world, love itself has become a battlefield, and the body, the enemy. The Middle Ages were not only an age of kings and cathedrals, but of control over flesh, over thought, over sin. What was once a private act became a public spectacle. Passion was no longer human, it was heresy. The same lips that whispered love could be branded with iron. The same hands that reached for tenderness could be bound in chains. So how did it happen? How did pleasure become proof of guilt and desire a doorway to damnation? In the centuries when faith ruled over fear, morality became a weapon sharper than any sword. Every kiss was weighed, every touch recorded, and every sinner, especially women, was made to pay. But this story is not just about punishment, it is about power, how religion, patriarchy, and fear combined to rewrite the rules of intimacy itself. To understand how the body became a crime, we must begin with the force that shaped it all, the Church. By the 12th century, the Catholic Church had become the undisputed architect of morality. It ruled not only over kingdoms, but over the human soul, and, more dangerously, over the human body. Desire was no longer a private emotion. It was a battlefield where salvation and damnation met. The Church declared the body corrupt, a vessel of temptation. Pleasure was branded as sin, and lust was said to be the whisper of the devil himself. From the pulpit, priests warned that every act of passion could stain the soul. Even within marriage, the one place where desire might have found sanctuary, rules multiplied like chains. Certain days were forbidden for intimacy, positions were dictated by divine order, and even a fleeting thought of lust could earn eternal punishment. Confession became both theater and prison. Behind the latticed wood of the confessional, men and women whispered their most intimate secrets, believing salvation lay in the priest's hands. But the booth was more than a place of forgiveness. It was a tool of surveillance. Each admission fed the Church's growing map of human weakness. Through guilt, control was perfected. The doctrine of sins of the flesh spread across Europe like wildfire. From peasant huts to royal chambers, no one was beyond scrutiny. A kiss outside marriage was a scandal. A pregnancy without a husband was a curse. The Church transformed sexuality into a currency of fear, one that it alone could absolve. To maintain this control, rituals of shame were performed in public squares. Adulterers were forced to stand barefoot before the cathedral, holding candles of penance. Prostitutes were flogged beneath church steps, their cries drowned by hymns of purity. Every punishment was framed as purification, as if pain itself could wash the soul clean. Yet beneath this holy terror lay something deeper, a hunger for dominance. The Church's war on desire was never just about faith, it was about hierarchy. If sin could be defined, it could also be taxed, confessed, and punished. Power lay not in salvation, but in guilt. And so, generation after generation, men and women were taught to fear their own flesh. Pleasure became proof of corruption, touch became temptation, and love itself, once the purest of human instincts, was twisted into something dangerous. The bell rings again, the square fills with murmurs, then laughter. At the center, a woman kneels, her hair shorn, her face smeared with ashes. A sign hangs from her neck, adultera, adulteress. Around her, the crowd chants prayers of purity, though their eyes linger too long. It is not justice they seek, it is spectacle. In the Middle Ages, punishment for passion was theater. Public shame was both entertainment and warning. For every soul tempted by sin, there had to be a body sacrificed to morality. In England, women accused of adultery were stripped to their slips and paraded through town on donkeys backwards, clutching a candle of repentance. The message was clear: the body that had disobeyed must now become its own humiliation. The scold's bridle was one of the cruelest instruments of this age, a grotesque iron mask fitted over the mouth, its tongue piece studded with spikes. Wives accused of gossip, lust, or defiance were locked in it and led through the streets, unable to speak, bleeding with every step. The church claimed it silenced sin. In truth, it silenced women. In France, the rituals were more elaborate but no less brutal. Couples accused of fornication were sometimes forced to walk naked to the church doors, holding hands, as bells tolled their disgrace. In some towns, men caught visiting brothels were flogged before the tavern they'd entered. In others, they were forced to wear mock phallic symbols carved from wood, a grotesque parody of their crime. The Holy Roman Empire was even more inventive. For adulterous men, the cat's tail punishment was common. Whippings administered publicly, the crowd jeering with every strike. For women, the ducking stool, a chair lowered repeatedly into icy rivers, served as both penance and torture. Each plunge into the freezing water was meant to drown out desire itself, but perhaps the cruelest part was not the pain, it was the gaze. The entire community was invited to witness the sinner's degradation. Children learned that purity meant obedience. Men learned that power meant virtue. Women learned that shame was their inheritance. The spectacle of sin became a mirror in which society reaffirmed its own false righteousness. Even the church's architecture reflected this obsession. Cathedral steps, where sermons of mercy were preached, also became stages for punishment. The same priests who offered communion could bless a flogging in the next breath. Sin and salvation blurred together until cruelty looked like holiness. Yet, behind the chants and torches, a quiet truth persisted. These rituals revealed more about fear than morality. They showed a civilization terrified of its own instincts, afraid of pleasure, of freedom, of the ungovernable power of desire. Public punishment was not just about one person's guilt. It was about controlling the collective imagination. And so, the spectacle continued for centuries. Lovers punished, bodies shamed, souls broken in the name of purity. But the deeper the church tried to bury desire beneath iron and prayer, the more it twisted into something darker. Some rooms in medieval Europe never saw sunlight. Their walls were thick, damp, and echoing with prayers turned into screams. These were not prisons, they were sanctuaries of purification, where the church claimed the body could be redeemed through agony. Here, purity was not preached, it was forced. The ideology was chillingly simple. If sin was born in the flesh, then flesh must suffer to be cleansed. The greater the desire, the harsher the pain required to erase it. Torture became theology. Iron, flame, and blade were reimagined as tools of salvation. Among the most disturbing symbols of this belief was the chastity belt. Contrary to later romantic myths, it was not merely a lover's lockbox. In some cases, it was a punishment, a contraption of iron and leather, locked around a woman's body, designed to prevent temptation. Some were removable, others were not. There are records of belts welded shut, the metal rusting into the skin, infections spreading like divine wrath. The church called it protection. In truth, it was imprisonment of flesh itself. In inquisitorial archives, even more horrifying examples emerge. Men accused of adultery or unchaste behavior were branded on the genitals with red-hot irons. The justification was that fire, the purest of God's elements, could burn away sin. Those who survived were said to be reborn, cleansed of lust by divine flame. For women, mutilation often replaced mercy. In parts of Germany and Italy, a woman accused of adultery could have her nose or ears cut off, marking her forever as impure. The act was performed publicly, sometimes blessed by priests, to warn others of the cost of temptation. Pain became performance, sanctified through ritual. Yet perhaps the most terrifying punishments came during the witch hunts. The church believed female desire was a gateway to Satan himself. Women accused of seducing men or even of lying with the devil were stripped, shaved, and tortured, iron pincers tearing flesh, molten wax poured into wounds, all to extract confessions that would save their souls. The logic was monstrous but methodical. Suffering was not cruelty, it was cure. Redemption through torment, salvation through mutilation. And within this twisted doctrine lay the full corruption of faith. The same God who commanded love was invoked to justify agony. The torturers called themselves servants of holiness. They believed they were battling the carnal nature of man. Yet their rituals were steeped in obsession, with flesh, with control, with the same forbidden acts they condemned. Each cry, each burned wound was a hymn to power disguised as piety. Behind monastery walls, flagellants whipped their own backs bloody, chanting hymns as blood ran down stone floors. They believed pain could drive out lust, that the lash could silence the body's hunger. These acts of self-torture spread across Europe during the Black Death, when fear of divine wrath was everywhere. To suffer was to prove loyalty. To endure pain was to earn forgiveness. But forgiveness never came. Only scars. Only silence. The Church's war on desire left not saints but ghosts, men and women who learned that love was dangerous, that passion was a sin too holy to feel. And even as centuries passed, the same doctrine of suffering as purity echoed through convents, courts, and homes. The tools changed, the iron cooled, but the idea remained that the body must be broken to be redeemed. She stood before the tribunal, her wrists bound, her hair matted with ash. The accusation was simple yet impossible to disprove. She had tempted men. To the judges, that was proof enough. In the eyes of the medieval church, the greatest danger to man's soul was not the devil himself, it was woman. From Eve's fateful bite of the apple to the Virgin Mary's impossible purity, the female body became both curse and symbol. Woman was the vessel of sin, yet also the unreachable ideal of holiness. Desire and danger were fused in her image, and in that contradiction, the Middle Ages built its most enduring myth, the sinful woman. Midwives, widows, unmarried women, those who lived outside male authority, were among the first to fall. Their independence was mistaken for witchcraft, their knowledge for seduction. When crops failed or infants died, the whispers began, she bewitched them. Torture followed swiftly. Under the rack, the accused confessed anything her interrogators demanded. Many admitted to lying with the devil, to feeding demons from their breasts, to using sex as sorcery. These were not confessions, they were survival, wrested from agony. In the infamous Malleus Maleficarum, the witch hunter's manual written in 1487, women were described as more carnal than men, more credulous, more deceitful. Their sexuality, the text claimed, was the devil's favorite weapon. This book became the theological backbone for centuries of persecution, turning misogyny into divine doctrine. The prostitute, too, bore the brunt of this moral hysteria. She was both needed and despised. Cities tolerated brothels because men required outlets for sin, yet those same women were branded with shame, denied burial in holy ground, and paraded as examples of corruption. Some were forced to wear distinct clothing, a red hood, a striped veil, marking them as forever unclean. And while women were burned, beaten, or branded, men's sins were forgiven in confession. The double standard was divine law. Male lust was weakness, female lust was evil. He was tempted, she was the tempter. The Church's teachings burrowed deep into culture. Paintings depicted women as serpents devouring saints. Sermons described their bodies as snares for holy men. Even childbirth, the most natural act of creation, was treated as penance for Eve's disobedience. Pain, said the priests, was her inheritance. But beneath the ashes of the pyres, a truth flickered. What they truly feared was not evil, it was power. A woman who owned her desire, her knowledge, or her independence threatened the order built on her submission. And so she was called witch, she was called whore, she was called sinner. Anything but free. The flames of the pyres have died. The iron masks hang rusted in museums. But the shame they forged still lingers, quieter, subtler, yet no less real. The Middle Ages taught generations to fear their own bodies, and that fear never truly faded. It evolved. Today, we no longer parade adulterers through the streets, yet the court of public opinion still burns with judgment. A woman's reputation can be destroyed with a whisper. A man's desire still defines morality, while a woman's still defies it. The chastity belts are gone, but purity culture wears new faces, hidden in sermons, laws, and the screens of a digital age obsessed with exposure and control. We speak of progress, yet echoes of medieval morality hum beneath modern life. Victim blaming, double standards, the quiet policing of desire. The instruments of torture have changed, but their purpose remains to discipline the body through shame. The church once called it sin. Society now calls it decency. But the language of control is the same. What they feared in the Middle Ages was never truly lust, it was liberty. Because freedom of the body means freedom of the self. And for those who build power on submission, there is no greater threat. They called it sin. But maybe what they truly feared was freedom.